In this video, I want to give you a general overview and introduction to NEX, a plugin for Maya that's now available for all Maya platforms. But before we get into what is NEX, I want to go over some other very basic information. As mentioned, NEX is now available for all Maya platforms as far back as 2011 up to the current release of Maya 2013 for Windows, Mac OS X, and Linux. We also have older builds available for Windows as far back as Maya 7 if you need older builds. Fully functional trials are also freely available for trials, so you get to use NEX for 30 days fully functional, and if you choose to purchase NEX, you just basically download a license and apply that license to that same trial, and it just basically unlocks it, so no need to have to download and reinstall anything. You just unlock the trial. When you do purchase a license of NEX, you get to use NEX for all versions of Maya installed on your machine. So if you have Maya 2011, 2012, and 2013 installed, you get to use the same license and not have to manage licenses for each version of Maya or have to make additional purchases for each update of Maya. So when Autodesk releases a new version of Maya, we typically update NEX within a day or two, and so if Maya 2014 becomes available, you shouldn't have to wait too long, and you wouldn't have to purchase an additional license for that version as well. You just download the new build and install it, and you should be up and running. No need to manage another license. Setup and installation is very simple and straightforward. For Windows, there's just a basic installer file. You can check and uncheck which versions of NEX you want to install based on what versions of Maya you have installed in your system. For Mac OS and Linux, there's going to be an archive file for each platform. Within that archive, you'll have essentially 3 plugins at this point, one for 2011, one for 2012, and one for 2013. Just copy the respective plugin file to the proper folder. Here you can see it's highlighted in yellow here. So for 2013, you'll just drop the nex-2013.bundle file into the plugin folder that's highlighted here in yellow. It's very similar for Linux, just do essentially the same thing, except it would be the .so file. Once you've done that, you just load the plugin from the Maya plugin manager, and you should have NEX up and running. If you ever need to uninstall it, for Windows there's an uninstaller, and it can be found within the control panel or from the deraster program files folder, or on Linux and or Mac OS you can just simply uninstall NEX by deleting the plugin file itself, or by just unloading it from the plugin manager. So that's it, pretty simple and straightforward, just one file and you're up and running. So now that we have some of the basic information of NEX out of the way, I want to go over a general question of what is NEX. NEX is primarily a modeling plugin for Maya, though there are some universal commands that are applicable beyond modeling. For the most part, it's a modeling plugin. With NEX, you get some unique tools to Maya that you would normally not get, but we also supersede some existing Maya tools. I'm going to go over this in a little bit further in this video, but for now, just kind of keep it general. One other point I want to make is everything that you do in NEX is safely integrated. So basically, you can safely share files created with NEX with other Maya users without having to worry about your files not opening correctly or your files being dependent on NEX. Everything that's done in NEX makes use of nodes that are already native to Maya. This is very important for people that are in a shared environment that may have NEX installed on some machines, and some machines may not have it, or you're creating files and you're sending it off to be rendered in a render farm. You don't want to have to manage these things. So one thing we've always kept in mind and we've always been conscious of is to make sure that your files will save perfectly intact and nothing is going to ever be dependent on NEX for ever opening or needing to edit those files in the future. Here in this video, I want to go over the general philosophy behind NEX. So with NEX, we didn't want to create a plugin for Maya that just adds a bunch of new tools. We wanted to re-examine the tools we're already familiar with, especially with respect to modeling, and try to refine those tools and re-examine how we can make those tools more streamlined. So if you're new to NEX, you may notice that there are some tools that may seem redundant, like for example like a select and transformation tools, and even some mesh editing tools, but they're there for a reason, and the goal again is to make everything sort of work with everything and kind of unify just the whole modeling approach. So in this video I'm just going to go over some of those examples, but before I do that, let me actually go ahead and thank Alex over at CG Society with his nickname MetaMesh. He has graciously provided this mesh to us, and I'm very thankful for that. So it's a very cool looking model, and again, thank you for that. So here I'm going to go over some basic examples. So within Maya, if I wanted to create a selection, for example, let's say an edge ring, I can go over here and actually switch to the edge ring tool, or I can just individually pick those edges along that ring, or switch to or run a command or find the hotkey or whatever. It's just basically a bunch of different ways, but nothing is really all that streamlined. I mean, we're already in a selection tool. Why not basically integrate that right in there? And so with NEX, we essentially did that. So right now, if I wanted to create an edge ring, I can just Control Shift and select any edge along that ring and double click, and you'll see I get that partial ring selection. If I go over here and start again and double click on an adjacent edge, you can create a full edge ring. And so I can just keep expanding on that and just double click, and you can see that I can just quickly add edge rings to my selection. If I hold Control and click, you can see I just removed that from my selection, and if I hold Control and double click here, you can see that it's now removed that partial edge ring. So all that right there integrated within the NEX selection tool, and of course you can do that same sort of thing right here with any of the transformation tools. So along the same lines with selection, I want to go over some of the symmetry tools within NEX. So in Maya, let me just go ahead and switch to Maya and double click the actual tool to expand it. I can go over here and actually turn on reflection. And so now if I ever make any selections, I'm going to actually go to face mode just so I can see this a little easier. You can see that the components on one side are being selected and the components on the other side are being highlighted. They're not actually selected, but they are highlighted, so I can now make transformation tools. The problem with this is that I can only make transformation edits, and anything else is not really going to be respected on the other side. So it's kind of just a halfway there approach towards symmetry. Now if we examine this same sort of thing in NEX, actually let me go ahead and turn off symmetry or reflection right there, and actually go over here in NEX and go to edge mode and select any edge along the center of this mesh and turn on symmetry. You notice now my highlights are blue, and if I go over to face mode, it's a little bit easier to see. You can see now anytime I make any selections on one side, it's automatically expanding that selection to the other side. So now if I just go ahead and hold tab and make a raycast selection, you see again, since we have the selection on both sides, we can do anything with respect to even Maya. So in some ways, NEX is integrated within Maya a little bit more thoroughly than some of the tools that are already in Maya. So of course we can click extrude and all the other mesh editing tools, and it's going to be applied to both sides, of course, because it's just selected at both sides. And we can of course make transformation edits on both sides as well. So not just selection, but overall just transformation in Maya, or I'm sorry, in NEX is we try to make those a little bit more powerful as well. So let's examine that. So right now, if I go over here and I make a selection, you see it's still applied to both sides. I can hold Control Shift and middle click drag to slide my selection. So you can see that it's sliding along that edge, and this is right now just with the single vertex, but it's applying it to both sides. And you can switch from edge slide to surface slide, and you can also even slide across a different surface, and that's very useful if you're resurfacing a mesh or retopologizing a mesh. You can use some of the tools here to actually apply, like for example, like extrude, and apply that on top of another mesh, and we'll go over that in another video, but it's a very general approach towards slide. I'll show you some other quick little useful features within the NEX transformation tools. If you hold the middle click or middle mouse button on any highlighted component, you'll notice that you can quickly tweak it, so you can just move it in the screen axis. If you have an actual axis handle active, you can tweak it along that specific axis. So it's just, again, a very general approach that kind of is integrated throughout the entire application. Another thing worth mentioning is if I turn on or press B, it turns on soft selection. You can see soft selection is automatically highlighted, and it's showing you a live preview of what will actually be affected. And of course we can now tweak the components. Here I'm doing it again in screen space, but if I hold Control Shift, I can slide that surface. So now it's actually sliding. If I kind of move from a side angle here, even if I pull the mesh all the way over here, you can see that it's actually still staying along that surface because it's just sliding the components along its current surface. Again, that's, like I said, a very general approach towards it. So everything sort of works with everything. So we can turn on slide, we can even use soft selection with slide, and it's all kind of right there. So these are things that you don't, I mean, we have a slide tool. I'm going to go ahead and turn off soft selection. We have a slide tool in Maya. There's a, I guess it's called the edge slide tool. But again, it doesn't work. One aspect, it doesn't really work with symmetry. So if we turn off symmetry here and I go over here and make a selection, even if we go over to the native reflection tool here and I turn on slide, you'll see that it doesn't apply to both sides. So some of the things that that are relevant within one tool of Maya doesn't cascade to other tools. And even if we were to make that selection, so if I go back here and I'm going to turn off reflection here, and I'm going to select this edge again and turn on symmetry. I'm going to go ahead and show you the slide within NEX. Again, you can just hold Control Shift and middle click drag, and you can see I'm just sliding the edges along that those components. We can, if you don't want to use Control Shift, you can just turn it on, and it's basically just going to apply to your edits or your manipulator transformations. But here I can just quickly make that slide along that edge. But now I have that selection, and if I go over here just to the slide edge tool, and even after I've made that selection, you can see that it's not necessarily doing what I would predict. It's kind of sliding one edge in one direction and another in another direction. So that's why it's kind of nice to have the slide integrated within the transform tools sometimes too. So that pretty much wraps up the general philosophy behind it. Again, yeah, there are some similar tools, but it's approached differently in that it's trying to make everything work with everything all under one context. At the heart of all the tools within NEX is the NEX PreSelection Highlighting Engine. And so in this video I want to give you an overview of how the PreSelection Highlighting Engine works in NEX and how that compares to the advertised PreSelection Highlighting in Maya. So in order to do that, I'm just going to quickly create a polygon sphere, and I'll go into vertex mode, and within the Maya Select or transformation tools, you'll notice that as you move your cursor over a component, the actual component will highlight. It's a little bit hard to see because my cursor is directly on top of it, but it's basically highlighting, giving me an indication of what's going to be selected before I make my selection. So right off the bat, it becomes a little bit obvious to notice that it's not very useful because obviously my cursor is already on top of the component, so the pre-selection highlighting indication isn't really giving me anything really all that useful because again my cursor is already on top of that. Beyond that, it's also fairly difficult to still make my selections. I can go and make a selection here, and when I want to make this selection I have to be very meticulous about it. I have to actually sometimes zoom in or slow down to actually make my selection. So a lot of times you have to get really close onto it, and you're kind of having to navigate your scene just to change or add or subtract your selection. Now that's vastly different than how the pre-selection highlighting in Maya or in NEX works compared to Maya. So again, one key aspect of pre-selection highlighting in NEX is that it's integrated throughout all the tools. So your mesh editing tools, your selection tools, your transformation tools, they all get the same kind of treatment with pre-selection highlighting. But just in this example, I'm going to show you with just overall selection. Again, with selecting vertex points, I can just move my cursor in that general vicinity, and you'll see that that cursor is already highlighted. And as I move my cursor to the next vertex, it's switching to that vertex. And again, it's a lot more liberal with how you can make your selections. Again, I can just start a selection here and just kind of jump around, and I'm not necessarily having to slow down at all to change or add to my selection. It's just getting my cursor in that general vicinity, and I'm right away able to make my selections. Again, compare that to how it works in Maya, and you'll notice that it's, again, not necessarily just the fact that it's going to be faster to make selections in NEX, but it's also the pace at which you're doing it. You're not having to speed up and slow down. Of course, with Maya, it's very, very quick to switch to the next component, but when it's actually time to make that selection, you're going to have to either zoom in or start to slow down to make that selection. Of course, when selecting components on your mesh, that's something you're going to be doing quite often, especially when modeling. So you can get to be quite fatigued having to constantly be so meticulous about your selections, and so having a very powerful selection engine is very, very useful, and it's going to make the overall modeling process much, much more enjoyable. Beyond that, a lot of effort has gone into optimizing the pre-selection highlighting. So here, if I zoom out, you'll see I have a fairly dense mesh here, and if I go into component mode here, and again we're in the native Maya pre-selection highlighting or native Maya selection and transformation tools. And as I move my cursor across the mesh here, you can see that the actual pre-selection highlighting is trying to keep up with my cursor, but it's kind of lagging a little bit further behind. Now, if you compare that to the selection or transformation tools within NEX, you see that the pre-selection highlighting keeps up, and it just overall feels like it's a lot quicker. We've done quite a bit with optimization, not just in speed, but just in overall making sure that things that you want selected are going to be selected. A lot of times in Maya, when trying to use the native tools, you're making mistakes when trying to make selections, where with NEX we've gone through and kind of intelligently noticed where those mistakes might be and tried to make those the selection tools just overall more intelligent. But besides that, again, the speed is just overall just a lot more interactive. In fact, you can even turn on soft selection, and you can see that I can still see my pre-selection hiding even with soft selection on a fairly dense mesh. So that's it. That's pretty much everything I wanted to show with NEX. I hope it gave you a good understanding of what NEX is and how it works and how it's integrated within Maya. There are a lot of unique tools to NEX that I didn't really show, like for example Quadra, which is a very powerful retopology tool. That's also part of NEX. There's Connect. It's a very precise cut tool that lets you adjust the segments and the pinch and slide options. There's also a multi-cut tool. It's very versatile, and it's a much more reliable tool for cutting your meshes. Again, all these tools and everything that's been integrated with NEX has been done safely, which means that you're not going to have to worry about your scenes, not opening later on a machine that doesn't have NEX installed. It's just you can use NEX very, very comfortably and freely. The last thing I want to mention is that if you want more information or if you want to get a better understanding of all these other tools or features that I haven't shown, feel free to visit the NEX webpage at drester.com/NEX. There's also a Facebook page that we just recently set up, and there's also a YouTube channel that you can get more information. So feel free to subscribe or whatever it is you do on Facebook to get more information. But on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel to get updates on new videos. And of course, with our website, you can register with us. And I think in the many years we've been in business, or actually the 6+ years we've been in business, we've only sent out like 3 newsletters. So we don't send them out too often, but when we do, it's only for when we have good information we want to share with you. So feel free to register with us, and we promise not to spam you. Anyways, I hope all is well. I thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and feel free to send us any feedback you have. I appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.